Welcome to Property Question Time. This is the programme that allows you to ask our experts the answers to all your property related questions. I'm Stephen Galpin, and joining me today are our panel of experts. John Howard, hello.
Hi.
Mike Gray of Deadman Gray Auctioneers.
Hi.
And Paul Mahoney, who's joining us directly linked from Australia. Right, on with the first question, and the first question is going to you, Mike. It's a very basic question, but one I'm sure many of our viewers ask. What is the process of buying a house through an auction?
In terms of the process of buying, it's a very modern and popular alternative these days. And for the buyer's benefit is that all the information is provided for you in a legal pack before the auction. So instead of going through looking at properties and still not quite sure the legal position, it's all available in front of you. You'd normally try and get to make sure you've had a good look at the property well before the auction, because there have been experiences where people leave it a little bit too tight to the date itself. And then they're rushing around deciding, is this the right place, is it the right investment to purchase, and cut things a little time to check out the legal pack. But so the first thing is you've got to identify, is the auction in a region, an area in which you can attend? And secondly, are you looking to spend out and invest the solicitor to check out the legal pack before the auction, or in some cases, some of the experienced investors will take a chance.
Right, okay. And what happens if the property isn't quite up to scratch? Is that specified in the seller's pack?
The details in the auction will be so much more briefer than a set of sales particulars through a traditional residential or commercial agent. And it's a little bit more like it's in the marketplace, and you've got to check it out and do your own due diligence. Nothing's there to be covered up or misled, but it's probably a more brief set of particulars, and you do your good homework.
Okay. John, have you got anything to add to that? I'm sure as a developer you've bought many things through an auction.
Well, also I was a shareholder, made a shareholder of an auction house for National One for 9 years. So, like Mike, I know the inside track, as it were. What I would say is that it doesn't matter however experienced you are, you must read the legal pack, and you must. I still get a solicitor to read the legal pack for me. Even though I'm that experienced after 40 odd years. I know I don't look that old, but so that's really essential. And some people, I think I'm right in saying, Mike, some people don't view the inside of the property before the auction.
It's quite amazing.
And I only ever did that once in Liverpool when I was 24 years old. I made a terrible mistake. I've never done it since. Always view internally. Never take it. Doesn't matter how experienced you are. Still go in that property.
And how easy is ease of access for a potential buyer?
Oh, that's easily arranged, because bear in mind the auctioneers are used to a very tight timescale, and the catalogue may be available for 21 days, and the day that catalogue's launched, viewing arrangements, either keys or access to tenants, is something that's all pre-organised, sometimes with block viewings. The block viewings is a very popular way of getting into see these properties.
It's a great way of doing it, because also you get to gauge, if you're a buyer, of course, you get to gauge, a potential buyer, you get to gauge how many people are there.
What the other interest is.
My advice on that is that actually, I've gone around properties to buy, loads of people, and I'm thinking, I'm not going to bother bidding. You get to the auction room, and I wish I looked at the legal pack and got my lawyer to, because only 2 people bidding or 1 person bidding. So never be put off whether there's 50 people viewing a property or 1.
Okay.
It only takes 1 to buy it.
Yes,
it's interesting that John said about strong advice to check a legal pack. I was speaking to a surveyor the other day, again, similar background, 40 years in the business, active for clients buying at auction, and also a buyer himself for investments. And he said just a couple of months ago, he said, do you know, there's one thing I always tell myself, no matter what it looks like and what you think, you've got to go and see it. And property is a little bit like that. You know, gone are the days 30 years ago where perhaps people used to take out the photograph, the gasometer behind the building, or unattractive next door.
Yeah, we get sued for that.
You can't do that. But you never know what you see when you turn up and have a look inside.
Right, John, we'll move on to your question now.
Yeah,
right.
I'm waiting for this.
Right, well, here we go. I wanted to follow in my grandfather's footsteps and develop my own property. I've already got my eye on a good plot of land.
Yep.
I know I can get it for a reasonable price. What are the steps I'll need to take purchasing the land and to begin development on what will hopefully be my new home?
Well, it's great that he's following his grandfather's footsteps. I don't know what his father did, but he's doing his grandfather, which is great. What I would say, I'm assuming it's got planning permission. I think we're assuming it's got planning permission.
I think we must assume that, yes.
So the first thing he needs to do is check out the ground conditions and that type of thing. He needs to do a full schedule of works. So get a charter surveyor in to do a full schedule of works for him, or building surveyor, so that when he goes out to tender to 2 or 3 different builders, which I presume he will be doing, they all sing off the same hymn sheet, and they are all pricing it the same way, because that's the only fair way of doing it. Once you get the prices in, if they're too high, don't be despondent. You can always go back and negotiate the price with the builder, the one you like. And once you've done that, always check out what other work he's done in the past to make sure they are bona fide, and also make sure financially they're not going to go bust halfway through the project.
John, is there a particular professional body that can act as mentor or guidance for this sort of project when it's so relatively small?
Yeah, what I would say is yes, the building surveyor who's going to be doing the schedule of works can hold your hand right through the process, because the one thing you don't want to do is pay the builder every month too much money. So that work needs to be valued, and the only person to really value it who's experienced and professional is the surveyor, because the builder will want more than he's due, and it's very important that you pay him what he is due, and at the end there's some left over, so that they come back and do the bits and bobs that need doing before they get the final stage payment.
Sure, got it. Okay. Mike, just a question for you on this. We've talked about the legal pack that's prepared by auctioneers when they're selling houses. If one builds your own home, presumably it's not going to have NHBC guarantees, or unless you contract out to a builder that's already set up with them. Any advice for somebody who doesn't want to do it as a new home but does it as an investment? Any pitfalls of a new property in auction?
In terms of buying, well, first of all, don't build anything new without an NHBC or a similar certificate.
Yeah.
There are 4 or 5 in the marketplace now.
There are now. It's a lot easier than it used to be.
It used to be NHBC,
Yeah.
and that was it.
That was it. Now there's quite a few.
In fact, probably the other alternatives are more simple for the smaller
and
investor.
much cheaper.
Yeah. What we often say to a lot of people, if we're advising in that situation, is don't just consider if what you're going to do for the property. You may be using cash, you're not needing to finance, but there's no good doing that, because one day you'll probably want to sell on and you want to realise full market value. And if you need to do that, you need all your ducks in a row and certificates lined up at that point. So, but in terms of the advice of the auction, I think what we've covered, you've got to look at it. Do your due diligence, get your solicitor on the legal pack, check out everything, and then get to the room and try and negotiate the best deal you can. The trouble is, like all risk and reward, you can spend quite a bit of time sometimes being unsuccessful in actually buying. So you've perhaps done a survey and you've had your solicitor bills and you haven't turned out to be the buyer. But there's an interesting that often happens. You know, when people turn back and say, well, I think that will go for more money, I won't get involved and spend any time on that one. Yep. It happened in an auction just recently where it sold for £50,000 less than the expected sale price. The clever ones were the ones that did their work beforehand. They were there ready to buy it and got it in the room. The unlucky or disappointed ones, the ones who thought to themselves, I won't go to that cost, I won't do my research, we'll wait and see what happens.
Okay.
And fun enough, they missed it.
Yeah.
There we are. Gentlemen, thank you very much for that. Paul, now I have your question. Hi, I want to buy a property to rent out as an investment. Why do I need a buy-to-let mortgage? Can't I just get a normal one?
Okay, yeah, good question. The answer to the question really depends on what you're planning to do. So you mentioned about getting a normal mortgage and renting the rooms out. Now, you can do that if you're actually planning to live there. So a normal mortgage, or a residential mortgage, meaning that that place is going to be your primary place of residence, you can definitely do that, and you can rent the rooms out. You can in fact rent the rooms out up to, I believe it's around £7,000 per annum of income, which is tax-free. So the government is actually encouraging people to do this to, create more availability of property. So that can be a good option if you're planning to live there. But you know, sometimes the best possible investment for you might not be where you're wanting to live. And I wouldn't say to buy somewhere just because you want to live there, because that's, you know, going to be using quite emotional criteria. Whereas when it comes to investing, you should be very commercially minded and unemotional. You know, it should be about making money as opposed to what you want or like. So it's going to come down to what you want to do. You know, are you going to live there? If so, then what you've mentioned, you could do that. But you also mentioned about investing in property, or, you know, buying a property as an investment. Now, if that's what you're going to do and you're not going to live there, then you definitely will need a buy-to-let mortgage. That, you know, these are mortgages specifically tailored for the purpose of buying a property to let it out. It's also easier to get a buy-to-let mortgage than it is to get a residential mortgage. The reason for that is the serviceability for a buy-to-let mortgage is linked to the rent from the property as opposed to your personal income. You didn't mention about your personal income, but most lenders will only lend you up to 4 to 5 times of your personal income. So, you know, for example, if your personal income is £50,000, you will only be able to borrow about £200,000 to £250,000. Whereas with buy-to-let mortgages, generally you would be able to borrow quite a bit more because of the rental income. So that's another thing to consider. But, you know, to simplify things, in answering your question, it will come down to whether you're going to live there or whether you're not going to live there as to what type of mortgage you're going to need.
Paul, thank you for that. Good answer. Most helpful. Thank you.
The tax system has evolved significantly over recent years for property investors and developers. You may think that you and your accountant have a grip on these changes. However, unless you are receiving specialist tax advice from a specialist tax advisory firm, then it's unlikely to be the case. At ETC Tax, our team of highly experienced chartered tax advisors work with private individuals and companies to deliver effective tax planning whilst meeting HMRC compliance requirements. Let us help you to meet your personal or commercial objectives in the most tax efficient manner. ETC Tax, making the complex simple.
If you're considering renovating or building your own home, then you'll not want to miss the National Home Building and Renovating Show from the 28th to the 31st of March at the NEC in Birmingham. Get access to the Advice Centre, including Michael Holmes, the Director of Content at the Home Building and Renovation magazine, and Editorial Director Jason Orme. Get a free 15-minute appointment with an expert, including planners, builders, architects and more. There'll be over 100 exhibitors showcasing their latest innovations and ideas to help you improve or extend your home.
Now we're here today to talk about your book. It's John Howard's Inside Guide to Property Development and Investment for Newcomers. So John is an expert in property. He's bought and sold over 3,500 properties. Can you tell us a little bit about what motivated you to write it in the first place?
So it's a really good guide, I believe, from the very start to the end of the process. In the book, I actually explain the pitfalls that I've had, and so after every chapter there's an example of what to do because I've done it.
And what would you expect a reader to walk away, the main sort of pieces of information that they come away from?
This book can save them a lot of time and a lot of money. And if they're serious about getting into buying and selling property or buying and renting property out, I go through how to fund things, I go through about picking an agent, about picking a solicitor, about picking a builder, about the pitfalls of builders. They always have 3 jobs on at once.
Now, the property market is always changing, so it's very important to keep up with things like this, isn't it, if you're looking to get into property?
So in the book, I explain what to do in a hot market and what to do when things start to go wrong. And that's the most important advice in the book, totally, I think, what to do when it goes wrong. I'm not going to tell you now. You can buy the book and read all about it, because I've done it. I've survived 4 property recessions, 3 or 4.
If you've got a question about property, why not ask an expert? Property Question Time gives you the opportunity to ask anything you want, Whether it's about planning, finance, conveyancing, moving abroad, literally anything that's property related. The Property TV panel of experts are available to answer your questions no matter how complex they may seem. Simply email your question to info@propertytelevision.tv and join us on Sky Channel 189 to hear your questions answered.
Welcome back to Property Question Time with me, Stephen Galpin. Joining me today are Paul Mahoney, Mike Gray and John Howard. Thank you, gents. We're going to go over to Paul now in Australia. And Paul, this is your question. As it stands, I turn 27 next month and I have 36,000 left on my mortgage. My salary is about 35,000 a year and I've had my house 3 years next month and I've overpaid on it since I had it using my 10% overpayment allowance each year. I have about 12k in stocks and shares and ISAs and also a mutual fund for which I want to keep going. Instead of overpaying, am I better using the money and saving for another deposit and getting another buy-to-let?
Okay, well, yeah, good question. And firstly, well done. You know, you've done really well in paying down your mortgage. It's not really an either-or answer, though. You mentioned about should you pay down your mortgage or should you save that money to invest in buy-to-let? You can actually do both. And in fact, you're probably better off doing both because depending on the mortgage you have, it's probably, the interest rate you're paying is probably somewhere between 1% and 3%, depending on, what you went for initially. Now, by paying that down, essentially the saving, or you could look at it as the return on what you're paying down per annum, is that cost of the money, the 1% to 3%. However, as opposed to putting that money in the bank, which, you're probably lucky to get 1% on it. Now, by doing that, you might feel as though you're locking the money up in the property or, by paying down the mortgage. But in fact, what you can do is remortgage your own property to release that equity at the point that you have enough equity within the property to release and then go off and buy a property. So that's a sensible option. Pay down the mortgage, save yourself the cost. When you've got enough equity there, it sounds like from what you've said, you probably already do. If you've only got £35,000 left, I don't know where you're located or the value of your property in total because you didn't mention, but I assume you probably have enough there to remortgage now, release some equity and go and invest. So it's not an either or answer. Definitely seek advice on both the finance and what you should buy based upon your current situation, your goals and preferences to actually help you get started and work toward those end goals. Some initial points to think about: be very unemotional. Don't just buy around where you live because you know the area. Get advice and make sure you're investing in the best possible thing for you based upon very unemotional and commercially minded criteria. Because remembering, property investment is all about making money. It should be looked at the same way as any other investment should be. Very unemotional and making sure that you're making the right decisions based upon the current situation. So seek advice is the best way to go.
I say thank you, Paul. Thank you very much. Gentlemen, any comments?
Well, I think he's absolutely right. At the end of the day, he's the financial expert, Paul is, and he's got that spot on.
Right, okay.
Yeah, I think the financial guidance was correct, but as a property man through and through, it's not just a case, do I want to buy and buy to let or keep my money in stocks and shares? It's a case of still going out and doing your research and finding the right property.
In other words, running it as a proper business.
Yes,
absolutely. Yeah. And we've always said that, haven't we? That at the end of the day, it is a business. It may not be your main business, but it's still a business, and you need to be professional.
Yeah, almost not a property. It's which one do you fancy, and is it the right one?
I agree. Yeah.
Yes. And I think it's also it's a lot of people make a mistake. They just assume because they bought a property, it's going to make money. Yeah. And I think, Mike, you would probably know better than most with your business that's not always the truth.
I think the favourite phrase nowadays, and this maybe come through experience as the hairs turn a little grey, is it's always going to be a winner over a 10 or 12 year period. but don't always think you can get in and out in 2 years on the right side. So if it's a medium term to longer term bet, it'll beat the stock market.
Okay. All right. Thank you, gents. Thank you, Paul. John, question for you.
Good.
What really goes into developing a big-scale building that people like myself, members of the public, are completely unaware of?
Goodness me, that's a massive question.
We've got an hour or two.
Okay. Okay. Well, the experience, or the suggestion, or the one I'm going to mention is my latest one, which is £26 million to develop 150 flats in Ipswich. And when we purchased it while the builder had gone bust. So the skeleton was up, the concrete shell was up, but nothing else. So not only, it's very hard to do a big development like that in the first place, but when it's been started and you don't know what's been done or whether it's been done correctly or whether it's been done in the right position, we had to remeasure the building, we had to find plans for it and all sorts of things. That's a real challenge and something that after 40 odd years experience and having done a number of tower blocks, I'm able to do. And the financing of something like that is tricky as well because a lot of banks don't want to lend if it's already been started. So in that situation, we had Homes England, the government came in and lent us the money.
Okay,
so
fine.
that would be my, you know.
I wonder, given the question is sort of leaning towards obviously somebody who's not done a development and wanting to know the content of what goes into it. How important today are the green credentials for the building?
It's a good point. Very, very important, and most local authorities have a rules of which you have to abide by. So the green credentials are really, really important.
Right. Okay. Mike, do you have these blocks come into auction where builders have gone bust, or?
They have done over the years. It tends to go with a sort of pattern depending on market conditions at the time. People, as John says, people are quite nervous about taking over a scheme that's already been started, but then that's where experience kicks in and you've really got to know what you're doing. But if I give you a more simplified version, even if a small builder was to buy a house that had just been started by somebody else, or even taking it further down than that, if a builder is invited in to finish an extension as a contractor that somebody else has started, it's always that much harder, isn't it, to carry on where they have left off. It's not always necessarily a seamless task.
And they always charge a lot more.
And then you end up paying extra for phase two.
Yeah. I know they've got you by the...
Yeah, so it's...
doing mistakes. Yeah.
Yes.
So it's an opportunity, but it's not for the faint-hearted. No. And yes, they do come up from time to time. Usually, it's about 3/4 of the way through the development, because by then the developer is at their most weakest financial position, where they've bought the site, they've funded it, it's half built, and you've not yet got to the stage of bringing any income. And if they're running, say, 6 or 12 months behind, you can imagine how their cash flow is looking at that point.
And the interest, I can assure you, if you're late on a development finishing it, the interest racks up. And a lot of these banks will lend you the money for so long, but if you go over that, they then penalise you with bigger interest.
And not only from the banks, but from the purchasers themselves, I suppose.
Well, absolutely, because then if you've exchanged early on in the development or before it started, and you're late, they may well be able to get out of having to buy it as well.
Okay, Mike. Question for you now then. Yeah. I'm a first-time buyer with 20 to 25% deposit and a good salary. What's the average saving when you buy a property at auction rather than through an agent?
It's interesting.
That's a good question. What's Mike going to say to that?
Sometimes it's not necessarily a saving.
No bias.
But it should be 5 to 10% off what you consider as the retail market. But again, it's very much supply and demand. So with the regulated tenancies, where people expect a discount of more than 30-40% off the retail price, they'll end up paying more for that opportunity than you'd expect to do so. Now, what I'd like to show is that if one of those tenants has then moved on and it's now vacant, and it's an old house needing full modernisation, and the first-time buyer is expecting a discount to buy that, the chances are there's so many keen people to buy those houses a refurb, they probably don't get it at any discount anyway. And sometimes they'll end up paying
Paying
another
more.
10% higher than the price.
I mean, have you had a situation, Mike, where there's been another property down the road on with an estate agent, and you've actually got a higher price at auction?
Yeah, or very close to it. Yeah,
Or very close to it, and that's quite relatively common now, and that never used to be the case,
It didn't,
did it?
no.
But there's more and more people buying at auction through all these programs they see on TV and so on. It's quite interesting. And the other thing I would say is that if you are going to buy regulated tenants, there aren't many left. Years ago, you know, as people died off, of course, they replaced by short-hold tenancies. But what you do find is that if you're paying 70-80% of vacant possession value, which some people are, by the time you've refurbished that property when it comes empty, you've paid well over the odds for it.
Okay, well, there we are, gentlemen. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. So, John Howard, thank you very much
Pleasure.
indeed. Mike Gray, thank you very much
you.
too. And Paul, joining us from Australia, thank you for your contribution too. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again next time.
If you have any questions you'd like to send to the experts at Property Question Time, you can submit them via our website, on social media, or email us on info@propertytelevision.co.uk.
Property is a great investment option, but it's one of the largest purchases that you'll ever make. As individuals, we're all limited by our resources, and regardless of our experience, knowledge or time, we can achieve much more with the help of a qualified team and extra resources being available. Nova Financial specialise in assisting clients to achieve financial freedom through property investment. With over 100 years of experience, we shape your family's future. To invest in property with absolute confidence, call us on 0203 8600 or visit nova.financial.
The tax system has evolved significantly over recent years for property investors and developers. You may think that you and your accountant have a grip on these changes. However, unless you are receiving specialist tax advice from a specialist tax advisory firm, then it's unlikely to be the case. At ETC Tax, our team of highly experienced chartered tax advisors work with private individuals and companies to deliver effective tax planning whilst meeting HMRC compliance requirements. Let us help you to meet your personal or commercial objectives in the most tax efficient manner. ETC Tax, making the complex simple.
If you've got a question about property, why not ask an expert? Property Question Time gives you the opportunity to ask anything you want, whether it's about planning, finance, conveyancing, moving abroad, literally anything that's property related. The Property TV panel of experts are available to answer your questions no matter how complex they may seem. Simply email your question to info@propertytelevision.tv and join us on Sky Channel 189 to hear your questions answered. Proper Wealth covers all areas of wealth creation with a specific focus on property. Hosted by international property finance expert Paul Mahoney, the show invites industry experts to share their wealth of knowledge with viewers. From topics that include buy-to-let, tax, portfolio management, finance and planning, to hot investment spots and conveyancing, Proper Wealth covers it all. Proper Wealth, exclusive to Property TV.